Welcome to Pilgrim Lost. Come walk with us while we explore life in hopeful motion. Pilgrim Lost. It's Tony. I'm back. We are people inspired by international trekking, often the Camino de Santiago, more often than not the Camino de Santiago. By the way, personal note, my sister is 3 days away from Santiago right now walking. And so I'm excited. Sister, love you. Way to go. Proud of you. So she'll be walking into Santiago in a few days. So we are inspired by the Camino and other international treks, but trying to bring the trekking heart and the sort of the lifestyle of a pilgrim home to wherever we live. Be that in Washington, D.C. or Portland, Oregon. Speaking of D.C., today's guest, Kevin, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Tony. How are you doing today?
Thanks for being here. Kevin Belanger, right?
Excellent. Good work. You got it right.
Kevin, you work with Rails to Trails, correct?
Yeah, Rails to Trails Conservancy. We're a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C., but have feelers all over the country.
Okay. So producer Mark, who we all love, producer Mark, and he's got a big heart and lots of dreams. He went out and somehow tracked you down. And I just have to confess, I didn't know you were that big a deal until like this week when I started doing research on you. I'm like, oh my gosh, this organization is amazing. Like you guys
that Rails to Trails is a big deal. Not me specifically, but Rails to Trails Conservancy.
You know, you get caught in the shadow.
Absolutely. It's a really fun organization. We've been around since 1986. Yeah. We've got well over 100,000 members around the country. And then our presence is felt with over 40,000 miles of rail trails around the country as well, in every state and Puerto Rico.
Yeah. And I've been on all your website, which your web presence is amazing. You've got like railstotrails.org is your sort of home base. And then you've got the Trail Link app if I want to go find things.
Yeah, traillink.com. You can find that website or download the app as well. Yep.
Yeah, and I just went on, and that's going to be my go-to. I need to go find a place to hike app moving forward.
Yeah, you can type in where your community, see what trails are near you, what trails are where you're going to be traveling to. I use it personally. Like if I go to a new town, I want to know where am I going for a run. I pop up traillink.com.
Okay, we can get into all that. Let me just start with you specifically are working on this railroads being made into trails. Is that specifically what you work on?
Yeah, Rails to Trails, we were founded on the guise of railroads were abandoning a lot in the 80s, and they still do abandon at some point today. But we want to keep them in the public right of way as much as possible so people can use those linear corridors to walk and bike. So that's right. What we were founded on. Personally, I'm the project manager for what we call the Great American Rail Trail, which is a vision we've had for a long time. But basically, it's to connect a rail trail-like experience across the country between Washington, D.C. and Washington State. And when I say rail trail-like experience, rail trails are good because they're relatively flat, because the railroads could only follow a certain grade. So that gives you accessibility for the largest amount of people who can use it. So you're not going out hiking on like the Continental Divide. It's not like that kind of a going over mountains trail. Right. But it is the experience that goes through communities. So the rail trail is that. It also goes through communities because railroads had to stop every once in a while. Right. So you're still going through towns every 10, 20 miles. And really you can create that trail town feel, the economic development potential of rail trails.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what the Great American Rail Trail is for.
Okay, just nuts and bolts, because I admit I'm ignorant. You're going in and like pulling out railroad ties and then replacing the surface, or like explain to me how that works.
Yeah, so a rail trail literally will be taking the exact corridor that a railroad used to go on, and however it happens, whether it's someone buys the corridor, it abandons, and the railroad donates it to a city or a county, however it becomes into a public or private entity that's going to turn it into a trail, they'll then pull up the tracks, they'll pull up the ties, and they will surface it somehow, whether it's asphalt, whether it's just a crushed stone surface that's still flat enough that people on bikes and
Right.
wheelchairs and strollers can use it.
Right.
And that's that. It's a simple concept, and it takes a long time to develop because of various factors. But there's, as I said, tens of thousands of miles around the country that have been created.
And this one particular trail, you're connecting Washington to Washington.
Yeah, so it's actually comprised of many individual trails.
Right.
So it's over, when it's completed, it'll be over 3,700 miles. Right now, there's just about 2,020 miles completed on the ground, and that is connecting 150 individual trails. So right now, you could get on a bike or walk from my house near Washington, D.C., all the way to Pittsburgh without ever having to go on a road, without having to interact with traffic. That's the experience we want across the country. We've got some gaps as we go across, but that's the feel that we're looking for. And there's trails in every one of those 12 states. Lots of the good experiences you can go out and have right now.
So a lot of our community have either been on the Camino de Santiago or dream about going. And one of the great things about the Camino is, you know, every 3 to 6 miles, you walk through a village that has, you know, a place to stay. So you can sort of have this multi-day walking experiences. Is the same thing going to be possible on this, at least in sections?
That's the goal. Yeah. We've got some work in some places to do, but right now, especially, I've done the Pittsburgh to DC trip myself, and it took me about 6 days. And you have a town every 10 to 20 miles. So on a bike, that's very doable. Walking 10 miles, hopefully you're able to do that, and that you have the places to stop. But even on the C&O Canal, which is along the Potomac River, they have campsites every 5 to 6, 7 miles. So it's not going to be quite that same experience, but we've got a similar feel we're looking for.
Amazing. Now, since you do this every day, do you have any thoughts on why like Europe is so good at walking trails? At least from my experience, I lived in Europe during my 20s, and the States seem to be so bad at it. How do we get here? Am I interpreting it correctly? Am I misinterpreting it? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Putting on my speculation hat, I'm assuming it's because of the way that we developed in the United States. Europe developed well before cars were created. We certainly have chosen the car as our method of laying out the land. I got a degree in community and regional planning at the University of Oregon. Shout out, go Ducks.
I grew up in Eugene, but I went to Oregon State. So,
well, that's okay. I don't mind.
All right.
So yeah, in that, I mean, you can just see the development patterns of the interstate system and how you can't hardly do anything in this country except in isolated communities without a car. So that we need to really consider what that looks like on the local scale and how we connect those local networks together. That's really where we come in to try to make these bigger networks happen.
But even, I mean, the roads themselves are not safe. I mean, producer Mark and I were talking about, he lives in Central Oregon, and there's times that he just wants to like walk down a country road, and the road itself has got a terrible edge to it, you know, where you feel like you're going to roll your ankle, or cars are flying right past you at 60 miles an hour. It's very, very frustrating.
We don't prioritize people on foot and people using bikes and people using wheelchairs and things outside of a personal automobile. It's just not a priority we've had. Certainly in many communities it is, but on the grand scale, that is not something the US has been particularly good at.
Right.
And it shows in that experience that every single person listening to this has a similar experience of trying to walk or bike somewhere that is just inhospitable to do so.
Well, drawing from our common experience, Eugene, Oregon, the location of the University of Oregon, Eugene has an amazing network of trails for an American city. It also happens to be called, like, you know, what, Track City, USA, Bike City USA, whatever. They've literally had to build their identity around we preference foot travel in order to create what is a fairly decent network of walking trails in Eugene, but that's so rare.
It is. It was a large part of the reason why I got into what I'm interested in now is arriving in Eugene from an East Coast boy. I knew I wanted to spend some time out west. And I
Right.
bought, with the last few $100s I had to my name, I bought a bike at Play It Again Sports on Willamette Boulevard in Eugene, Oregon. Shout out to them. And
Know it
that bike
well.
got me
Know it well.
through grad school and beyond. But biking around downtown on bike lanes, which are not the creme de la creme anymore. But in the late 2000s, I was like, yeah, this is amazing. I'm like,
Amazing.
there's cars here. I'm here, but I at least have a line of paint. Now we try to put bollards. We try to make it separated so that people are not at all involved in automobile traffic. But biking around, I was like, this is great. And how do I make this happen everywhere?
So I live in Portland, and by American standards, Portland's trying to do this well as far as bike lanes, bike boulevards, reserved walking, protected walking, sidewalks and things like that. But even here in Portland, you know, super progressive, pat ourselves on the back, liberal city, you know, we do everything green, blah, 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 blah. You go into the marginalized neighborhoods, the poorer neighborhoods, the neighborhoods of color in Portland, and it's not just there's not protected sidewalks, there are no sidewalks. It's not that you can't get to a trail, it's like there is no trail to get to if you want to go for a walk. How much is your organization concerned about the justice discrepancy around even providing these sort of resources to folks?
Yeah, that's huge. Something we've been focused on for years, though it's clearly become more in the national psyche recently, and we've fully dove in and invested our time and energy into making sure that people have access to trails. So something major that we're focused on right now is actually making sure that people have access to trails that they can use. For instance, putting on our traillink.com saying that this trail is actually this trail, telling us that it's what the surface is.
Right.
Can you get from a parking lot if you're using a wheelchair to the trailhead? Those kind of things in terms of physical accessibility, but even in terms of racial and economic justice, those are major battles, which is why when we focus on something we call our Trail Nation projects, which are network building projects in different places around the country, including the DC area, including Philadelphia and Milwaukee area, we have entire programs set to figure out where are the trails investments most needed to make the biggest increase in accessibility to trails for people of color and for low-income people who may not have had access before. And those are the places where we're lobbying to communities. Here's where you need to be building these trails. And it's working. In Milwaukee, for instance, on the 30th Street corridor, that neighborhood is this predominantly Black neighborhood that's experienced significant industrial disinvestment over the years. There's a rail corridor that goes right down the middle of it. We are working with our partners on the ground there in those neighborhoods to make a trail happen. And it's not quick. It takes time. This work only works at the speed of relationship building. And thankfully, we've got amazing partners there.
Right.
Cheryl Blue and Chris Boston, I'm looking at specifically in the neighborhood. But yeah, it's taking time, but it's working. And that makes me really happy.
Well, one thing that does go through poor neighborhoods are railroads, historically.
Yeah, for sure.
People with wealth don't want to listen to it. So, they didn't want the pollution, they don't want the sound. So put those things where I don't have to think about them. And suddenly there they are in poor neighborhoods, which maybe I guess there's an opportunity there.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do, is take the opportunity. And for instance, that 30th Street corridor, that's still actually an active rail line. It's not very active, but what we are proposing is to build what we call a rail with trail, a trail adjacent to the railway using that same corridor. And it happens all over the country. We've got great examples of rails with trails, we call that. But taking what you just described as a negative in the community and turning it into a positive, and turning this into the corridor of investment to get people around.
You mentioned Milwaukee, any other sort of just neat stories about how that's happening and how community leaders are coming together the relationship between poverty and health, poverty and physical movement, poverty and transportation. I mean, these are really, really big national issues that don't have easy answers.
Absolutely. Something we're focused on, and looking at a project that happened in DC recently, the 11th Street Bridge. They took what could have been a major project that could have caused incredible gentrification on the one side of the river, both sides of the river, really, the Anacostia River, where predominantly Black part of town and the Anacostia part of Southeast Washington, building this brand new bridge, amazing infrastructure, but there was huge fears of gentrification. So that they put it together what they called an equitable development plan to say, here's the list, and I'm not going to list them because I don't remember them all, but a major one is the community that is dealing with this now is the community that's going to benefit from it when it is completed. It's not, the intention is not to bring in new people and to not make other people rich on the work that's being done here, and laying out very clear structure of here's how we're doing that. So a major thing we're doing in Milwaukee on the 30th Street corridor, we have work with our partners on an equitable development plan, and we're in the beginning stages of that. And that feels really good, but it takes a long time to get it right. And I really am excited about the progress that's happening.
And that kind of ownership can only support the project long term, make, you know, trail maintenance, the sense of, and usage. I mean, if I'm a part on some level of creating it, I'm going to be all the more motivated to get out and utilize it.
Yeah, we're not here trying to dictate that trails need to go in certain spots and that you need a trail in your backyard, whether you want it or not.
Right.
What we're trying to do is say, hey, here's what we know trails can do for communities. Here's why we think this trail can work in your neighborhood. But ultimately, y'all are the ones who need to be fully invested in this happening. And we're not going to shove it down anybody's throat, but we've had great success in when it's community led and driven, the results seem to come as well.
So a lot, having played around in your websites a little bit, a lot of it seems to be about building a network of people. You said this thing moves at the speed of relationships. You know, I'm now registered on your sites, and I'm trying to get connected and figure it out. And I'm going to start using TrailLink for my own walking and stuff. But in light of all of that, we exist to build basically a pilgrim lifestyle, a lifestyle of slowing down, of physical movement as a meditative practice, as well as something that's good for you physically, walking as a community practice, as a way to stay connected to your neighbors, to even be aware of what's happening in your neighborhood, to be sort of awake to the justice issues, being awake to the new small businesses that are going in around me, you know, the things that we can only see at the speed of walking. You know, we don't tend to notice them otherwise. Do you have any insights? Do you have any on sort of living this sort of life, and how people are benefiting from sort of trail usage, and how you think trail usage is helpful to just like human development generally? That was a lot.
Existential questions you're asking here, Tony, and I love it. These are not questions we ask ourselves just in the hallway randomly. This is fun. I love that. Yes, I get the joy of traveling a lot for my job because being the project manager of a trail that crosses 12 states, we have to go around a lot. And we don't have a huge presence out west, so I do get to go out there a lot, which is awesome. I get to see the trails that are built in the small towns, the 3-mile trails here, the 5-mile trails there. And I get to witness, because I like to go running in the morning, and whenever I can go use the trails in the communities we're at, I get to witness the life of the trail, how that is not just a nice to have, but rather it is some people's everyday, every morning activity that they're walking on this trail, and that they're saying hi to their neighbor who they see, or that they're having a walking to the coffee shop to go meet with folks. It's amazing to see what it can do for the lifeblood of a town, and not just a small town, even a big town. I spent also time in Portland, and the trails there are amazing along up and down the Willamette and beyond. And you'd see the same people commuting. You'd see people being slow, taking the time to breathe and to watch. Something else he just reminded me of was in Nebraska on the what they're calling the Northern Cheyenne Healing Trail. If you've ever heard of the Northern Cheyenne, it's a tribe out of Montana that had been taken out of their lands and brought down into the Oklahoma area against their will. And they tried to go back north, and they got imprisoned in Nebraska. And it was a terrible tragedy, massacre when they tried to escape. but their descendants now are working on. They've created a monument of where that happened in Nebraska, and now they're working on what they call a healing trail. It's a few miles out in western Nebraska near the town of Shadron. That will be the very intent of the trail is to be a slow contemplative trail. When they saw what we want them to be part of the Great American Rail Trail, they said, we don't want the trail for people to be biking through really fast or to be walking through really fast. We want you to take the time and slow down. And that has been great, honestly, in my mind, to remember that trails are not just to get between point A and B, but rather to explore and to be outside and to see the seasons change and to think about what's happened in this spot in the past.
Yes.
That has been a great relationship. I've really cherished getting to know them in this regard.
Northern Cheyenne Trail, is that what you called it?
The Northern Cheyenne Healing Trail. They have a grant right now for planning. Oh, look at this. We found the website right there.
Mark's got the URL up if you're watching on YouTube.
And in your notes, I'm going to share with you, we also produced a video with them in December this past year on their history and on the trail that they're working on. So hopefully in the next few years, that'll be completed.
Oh, that's going on my bucket list for multiple reasons. But back to this idea of slowness, the power of slowness. Do you, and again, I get philosophical. My doctorate's in theology, so you know these are places that I go when I think about these things. The sensation of having no time or needing to rush to something, that a lot of that is actually just a lie. It's the byproduct of sort of a lie we've bought into about what our life needs to be and what our life needs to be composed of. And for me to walk, like there's a cigar club that I like to go to that's 3.5 miles from my house. It takes me about 50 minutes to walk there. It would take me 20 minutes to drive. So really it's only a 30-minute difference to walk as opposed to drive. And so it's not that much more time I need in my day to walk 7 miles round trip. It's really not that much more time in my day. So do you have any, so I'm asking you to talk on this, how do we structure our life to embrace sort of this slowness, or to make walking or trail life more a part of who we are?
I'm going to say two things. I'm going to say something potentially controversial, but I actually really enjoyed the first few months of the pandemic. And that's going to be terrible because I'm very fortunate that I didn't lose anyone in my life. I never got sick. I did not lose my job. I'm very fortunate. But I loved being in Washington, D.C. when everything slowed down. I went for daily walks. I never went for daily walks before. That was not a thing I did. But I loved that speed. And I'm feeling, honestly, in the last couple of weeks, spring is our busiest season, and feels like everyone right now, it's late April, is trying to emerge from everything, and all the things are happening. And I'm feeling a little frazzled at the moment, to be very frank. But I'm trying to remember all the time to slow down, to choose the thing that is not the fastest way between point A and B, because that's not satisfying to me anymore. You know, that used to be how I lived. Yeah, I would walk really fast down the sidewalk, and I really noticed people like pass me on the sidewalks now. I'm like, this is a new experience for me. And I like it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how to do it. You know, I'm trying to schedule, if somebody wants to have lunch or coffee, I'm trying to schedule it within sort of a 4-mile radius of my house so I can just walk to it. And
like walking meetings at work is a thing that we're choosing to do as well. Like Rails to Trails, we come into the office 2 days a week now. And some of those times I'm going to have a walking meeting with my boss if we have to chat. Or when I'm at home, if I have a weekly thing, I'm just like, hey, let's just take that on the phone. And I've really enjoyed getting to just walk around and talk at the same time, because then I'm feeling less encumbered to check email and write notes. And I'm really can focus on the conversation I'm having.
Well, if one wanted to do a walking meeting, it'd be really helpful if there was like an app that would tell them where all the trails are nearby them, so that they could know where to go to have those meetings. I don't know if you can work on that for me.
Yeah, I'll make sure that the team at traillink.com knows that you asked about that.
So really quickly on trail link, all joking aside, can I can keep a personal log on it, right? Like say I
Yes.
want to do the 15 trails that are closest to my house, and I can sort of check them off or keep track of what I've done. Can I do that on there?
Yeah, you
I
can
haven't.
create, if you become a member of TrailLink, you can create, I believe, your own personal guidebook that says, here's the trails I want to do. And you can like look, I don't know exactly what format it comes out in, but yeah, you can choose how to do that, your own little bucket list if you'd like.
I am leaving in September to walk across Spain again,
Nice.
which I'm very excited about. I'm doing the Northern Road, which follows the coastline. So it's a little more rugged. And so over the next 3 or 4 months, I'm going to be having to do quite a bit of training. And I plan on planning out my training walks based on trail links, which is great. Kevin, you got so you said you get out to the West Coast. It's sort of the middle of the country that's needs to be built out to get the whole trail done, or
Yeah, so right now we're at 3,700 miles total when it's completed, and we've got about 2,020 on the ground, so about 1,700 miles to go. There's gaps in almost every state. The only state that's fully complete is Maryland right now, and then DC, which isn't really a state, but the C&O Canal and the Great Allegheny Passage complete Maryland, but every other state has work to do. So, yeah, even like, yeah, we talk about Wyoming. If you look at the map, there's not a lot of trail there, but there's a lot of enthusiasm and energy and work being done at the state and local levels to identify corridors. But you look at a place like Ohio, which is a strong trail state, we consider it's got an incredible network of trails. But there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a few places where we need to identify corridor, but there's so many places. Like this year, I'm expecting a lot of big wins, a lot of trail completions that we can celebrate. And that feels really good because we launched this in May 2019, and then we went straight into a global pandemic that has kind of tempered a little bit of the momentum, but not as much as we thought. Like people are still working on it. People are still excited. And my email box blows up all the time asking about, how do I do this? I want to do this. And it's so fun to watch like the people coming into us and asking to do a full cross country trip when really we weren't expecting a lot of people to want to do the full cross country route, especially before it's done. But a lot of people do. We expected more people to be doing it in small chunks in their region and stuff. So it's all exciting.
And I'll be honest, I'm regularly daydreaming about wanting to do a 4 to 5 day walk where I'm walking 10 to 20 miles a day. That's what the Camino is. And I want to experience that here in the States. It's just hard to figure out how to do it. And I don't want to walk on highways, and it's not safe. And so if hopefully I can utilize what you guys are doing to figure out some spots where I could walk and stay in a hotel, I don't mind walking 15 miles if I can sleep in a bed, I don't know if I want to do that and sleep on the ground, but
well, I'll encourage you. Washington State has a lot of great trails done. That's in your backyard ish, the closest section of the Great American Rail Trail to you. But I was just on the Olympic Peninsula a few weeks ago, getting to tour the Olympic Discovery Trail and what they're building with the Sound to Olympics Trail. And you can already do that in some of these areas. There's some places that it's not done and you will have to walk on the side of some roads, but there's some large chunks, 50 miles at a time, where you could really go out. We opened up the Beverly Bridge across the Columbia River on the Palouse to Cascades Trail in early April. And that was a game changer because you literally had to walk like tens of miles around the way, or you had to sneak on the interstate. No one was supposed to do this. It's illegal. I never heard of anybody do this. Don't put this on the podcast anywhere, right? But you would have to go around on the interstate to bypass it. So right now you can cross the river, and that opens up so many miles in Washington State on the Palouse to Cascades. So just a couple things in your backyard that I encourage you to go check out.
Awesome. And they're just opening up. Well, it's not, I guess I shouldn't be talking about something else, but they're just opening up the Corvallis to Ocean Trail too, which is a 3-day trail that's just opened up. So 3 to 4 day trail, which I'm excited about. But
that's amazing. That'll be beautiful.
Unbelievable. Kevin, anything else you haven't had a chance to say you'd like to share with us? Anything? Oh, let us know first of all, how can we be involved? How can any of us be involved?
Yeah, so we're a membership-based organization, so obviously we love our members. So if you are not yet a member and want to become, rails2trails.org, you'll see that there. We take donations, obviously, to help with our work. And then, of course, all of you trail organizations that build trails around the country need support as well. So please consider supporting your trail organization in your backyard. Follow us on all of our social medias at Rails2Trails, I think, on everything. And really what we love to see is people using our hashtags and all of that to talk about when they're on trails, because that's what builds more excitement and gets people talking about trails. So
Right.
please take pictures safely when you're out and post the heck out of them online. And just talk about trails in your communities. We want elected officials and decision makers to know that trails are not just nice to have, they're necessities. They are as important, if not more important, as the road network in your community. So don't be shy to talk about trails.
Thank you so much. That is Kevin Belanger with Rails2Trails. Thank you for coming on and telling us about what you guys are doing. I'm excited. I'm planning on spending time on your trails. Any closing thoughts before we let you go?
No, I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much.
You got it. Kevin, thanks for getting lost with us. Thanks everybody for listening in. This is Pilgrim Lost, and please follow us on @PilgrimLost and pilgrimlost.com. Talk to you soon.